The cowboy lifted his fork, tasted the meal everyone had mocked her for making, and suddenly the entire ranch went silent. What did he discover in that one bite? The wooden table shook as hungry ranch hands stopped talking. The fire crackled behind the kitchen stove, and Nathan Hayes slowly looked up from his plate at the woman standing by the doorway. Clara had arrived with only a worn suitcase and a forgotten recipe book, but that first supper at Broken Pine Ranch was about to reveal something nobody saw coming. Stay with us and discover her story. The stagecoach groaned its way down the muddy road into Pine Hollow, just as the morning clouds began to break apart over the Colorado mountains. Clara Whitaker sat quietly on the wooden bench inside the coach, both hands resting on the handle of her worn leather suitcase. The suitcase had belonged to her grandmother, the same woman who had taught her how to knead dough properly, how to stretch a small amount of flour into a meal, and how a kitchen could become the one warm place in a cold world. Inside that suitcase was almost everything Clara owned: 3 dresses, a small sewing kit, a few personal belongings wrapped carefully in cloth. And at the very bottom, protected between 2 pieces of folded fabric, was her grandmother's old recipe book. The edges were softened from years of use. The pages carried faint marks from flour-covered fingers and handwritten notes in faded ink. Clara touched the cover once before closing the suitcase. "Just need one chance," she whispered. The stagecoach stopped with a sharp jolt. Outside, Pine Hollow waited. It was not a large town. A single main street cut between wooden buildings that had endured more winters than anyone could count. The general store leaned slightly to one side. The blacksmith shop sent a thin line of smoke into the cold air. A small diner near the corner had a swinging sign creaking above the door. The mountains surrounding the valley were beautiful, but they did not make life easier. They only reminded people how small they were. Clara stepped down from the coach, her boots sinking slightly into the wet ground. The first thing she noticed was the silence. Not a peaceful silence, a watching silence. People looked up from their conversations. A man carrying a sack of feed stopped walking. A woman near the general store glanced at Clara, then whispered something to the person beside her. Clara had learned that whispers often hurt more when people wanted you to hear them. That her? I suppose it is. She's the one looking for work. Hard to imagine any ranch needing someone like that. The words followed her, but Clara kept walking. She had heard worse. At 28 years old, she had already learned that people often decided who you were before they ever learned your name. She had been called too quiet, too plain, too soft, too much. When she lost her position at the boarding house in Denver, the owner had not said she lacked skill. He had simply told her that some guests preferred a different kind of woman serving their meals. Clara knew what he meant, so she packed her suitcase and left. She would rather face strangers in a new town than spend another year begging people to see her as more than her appearance. The small advertisement she carried in her coat pocket had brought her here. Cook wanted. Broken Pine Ranch, room and board included. She folded the paper carefully and walked toward the ranch office listed at the edge of town. The walk took nearly 20 minutes. The road became rougher as the buildings disappeared behind her. Pine trees rose along the hillsides, their branches moving gently in the mountain wind. In the distance, she could hear cattle and the occasional sound of a hammer from a ranch outbuilding. Broken Pine Ranch sat beneath a line of dark evergreens. The name suited it. The fence needed repair. The barn roof showed patches of different wood where repairs had been made over the years. The main house was sturdy, but tired. It looked less like a home and more like something that had survived a battle. Clara stood at the gate and took a breath. She almost turned around. Almost. Then she remembered the empty room she had left behind in Denver. She remembered counting coins before buying bread. She remembered promising herself she would never again wait for someone else to decide if she deserved a place. So she opened the gate. A tall man stepped out from the barn before she reached the house, Nathan Hayes. Clara knew immediately who he was. Even if she had not seen his name on the ranch papers, there was something about him that made people step aside. He wore a faded brown hat pulled low over his eyes. His coat was dusty from work. His hands carried the marks of a man who spent most of his life outside. He was not old, but the years had left their signs. A quiet hardness sat around him. "You're the woman from town," he said, not a question. Clara held her suitcase firmly. "Clara Whitaker. I answered your advertisement." Nathan looked at her suitcase, then at her. His expression barely changed. "You came alone?" "Yes. That's a long road for a cooking position. I needed work." He looked toward the ranch buildings. "You understand this isn't a boarding house? I didn't expect it to be. You'll be cooking for ranch hands, men who work from sunrise until they can barely stand. They don't need fancy meals. They need enough food to get through the day." Clara nodded. "I understand." Nathan studied her for another moment. "You ever worked on a ranch?" "No." "Ever cooked for a group of men?" "Ever lived somewhere this far from town?" "No." The answers seemed to confirm everything he expected. Clara saw it, the doubt, the hesitation, the quiet assumption that she would not last. But she had spent enough of her life watching people decide her limits, so she lifted her chin slightly. "I may not know your ranch yet, Mr. Hayes, but I know how to work." For the first time, something changed in his expression, not warmth, not kindness, just a small sign that he had heard her. Before he could answer, the barn door opened behind him. A man with a dark beard stepped out. "Samuel Carter, one of the ranch hands. Boss, the boys are asking again about supper." Nathan looked annoyed. "Tell them it's coming." Sam glanced toward Clara. "This the cook?" The question carried more amusement than respect. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. "She's here to try." Sam looked back at Clara, then at Nathan. "Hope she's better than the last one." "I'm standing right here," Clara said calmly. Sam seemed surprised she answered. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Nathan turned toward the house. "Kitchen's inside." Clara followed. The kitchen told her everything she needed to know. The shelves were dusty. The stove needed cleaning. The cookware looked like it had been used until it could no longer survive. There were signs of people living there, but no signs of anyone caring for the place. Nathan stood near the doorway. "You still want the job?" Clara placed her suitcase down. You haven't even seen the pantry. I don't need to." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because every kitchen tells the truth." He looked around. "And what does this one say?" Clara ran her fingers lightly over the edge of the counter. "That nobody here has had time to make this place feel like home." For a moment, Nathan said nothing. The wind moved through the open doorway. Somewhere outside, a horse stamped against the ground. Then Nathan looked away. "You'll have supper ready by 6. Clara nodded. "Thank you, it's not permanent." "I understand. I'll pay what we agreed. Room and board." "That's fair." Nathan walked away, but paused near the door. "Miss Whitaker." She looked up. "Don't take it personally if the men are skeptical." Clara gave a small, tired smile. "I'm used to it." Something about the way she said those words made him stop. Only for a moment. Then he left. Clara stood alone in the kitchen. She opened her suitcase and placed her grandmother's recipe book on the counter. The old cover looked strangely out of place among the cracked plates and worn wooden shelves. But Clara opened it anyway. She tied back her hair, rolled up her sleeves, and began. By sunset, the entire ranch smelled different. Not like old wood, not like dust, like food, like something worth coming home to. Outside, men who had spent months eating whatever could be thrown into a pot looked toward the house. Inside, Clara Whitaker placed the final dish on the table. She knew they would judge her. She knew some of them already had. But she also knew one thing. A person could say many things before tasting the truth. The door opened. Boots stepped across the floor. Nathan Hayes entered first. He looked at the table, then at Clara. And for reasons he could not yet explain, the woman everyone in Pine Hollow had already dismissed was standing in the kitchen of Broken Pine Ranch like she belonged there. Nathan Hayes watched her from the doorway for another moment before he finally looked away. He had seen plenty of people arrive at Broken Pine Ranch with confidence. Most of them left without it. The ranch had a way of stripping away anything a person brought with them. Pride, expectations, promises. The land did not care how certain someone felt on their first morning. Nathan had learned that lesson years ago. His father had built Broken Pine Ranch with his own hands, adding one fence post at a time, one cattle drive at a time. But after his father passed, the place became heavier than Nathan ever expected. Every broken tool, every empty bunk, every unpaid receipt from the feed store seemed to remind him of what he had failed to preserve. The ranch was still standing, barely, and that was mostly because Nathan refused to let it fall. The men who worked there respected him, but respect was not the same as comfort. They followed his orders because they knew he was fair. They did not stay because they enjoyed the work. Meals had become another reminder of how tired everyone was. Most evenings, the ranch hands sat around the table eating quickly, barely speaking. Food was something to get through, not something to look forward to. That was why Nathan had not expected much from Clara Whitaker. He had expected another person who would last a few weeks and discover that the isolation was too much. He had expected complaints about the cold mornings, about the distance from town, about the work. Instead, she had simply tied back her hair and started cleaning. No speech, no excuses, just work. Nathan walked back toward the barn where the ranch hands were finishing their evening chores. Sam Carter was tightening a saddle strap while Eli Turner checked the horses. Benjamin Cole stood near the fence line, repairing a section of loose wire. "So," Sam said without looking up, "the new cook survived the kitchen?" Nathan ignored the comment. "She's making supper." Eli laughed quietly. "That fast?" Nathan looked at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, boss." But Eli's smile said otherwise. Benjamin pushed a nail into the fence post and shook his head. "Give her a week." Sam glanced over. "Think she'll last that long?" "I think she'll learn." The men laughed, not cruelly, but not kindly either. Nathan had heard enough. "She's working," Sam looked over. And that's more than most people do before they decide something is too difficult. The three men became quiet. They knew Nathan was not a man who defended people easily, especially strangers. Sam raised both hands, wasn't trying to insult her. Nathan nodded once, then don't. He walked away before the conversation could continue. The truth was, he did not know why he had reacted that way. Clara was an employee, nothing more. At least that was what he told himself. By the time the sun dropped behind the mountains, the cold had settled over the ranch. The men entered the house expecting the usual, a simple meal, something warm enough to fill their stomachs. Instead, they stopped. When they stepped inside, the smell reached them first. Fresh bread, roasted meat, something sweet mixed with herbs and spices. Sam looked toward the kitchen. "What is that?" Clara turned from the stove. "Supper." Eli removed his hat. "I figured that much." A small smile touched Clara's face. "Then you are ahead of schedule." The men looked at one another. It was the first time anyone had heard her joke. Not that they knew what to do with it. They sat down slowly. Nathan entered last. He noticed the difference immediately. The table looked different. The plates were arranged neatly. The old chipped cups had been washed and placed evenly. A small cloth covered the center of the table, something that probably came from Clara's own belongings. It was a simple thing, almost nothing, but it changed the room. Nathan sat at his usual place, Clara placed a plate in front of him. "Thank you for letting me use what was here." Nathan looked at the meal. "You didn't have to ask. I thought it was better than wasting time waiting for permission." Sam covered a smile with his hand. Nathan noticed. "Something funny?" "No, sir." "Good." The men began eating. For the first few moments, nobody spoke. Nathan picked up his fork. He expected ordinary food, maybe slightly better than usual. He was not prepared for the first bite. He stopped, not dramatically, not enough for anyone else to notice. But Clara noticed. She was standing near the stove, watching carefully. The seasoning was balanced. The meat was tender. The bread tasted like something from another life. A time when his mother was still alive. A time when supper meant more than simply filling an empty stomach before returning to work. Nathan looked down at his plate, then back at Clara. "You made this?" Clara nodded. "Yes. How?" The question came out before he thought about it. She seemed surprised. Years of practice. Nathan looked around the table. The ranch hands were eating slower now, actually tasting the food. Benjamin had already reached for another piece of bread. Eli was pretending he had not taken a second helping. Sam gave up pretending entirely. "Well," Sam said, "I'll admit I was wrong." Nathan looked at him. "About what?" Sam swallowed. "I expected something that would keep us alive." He glanced at his plate. "This might actually make us want to stay alive." The room went quiet. Then Eli laughed. Even Nathan almost smiled. Almost. Clara looked down, hiding the small expression that crossed her face. It was not a proud look. It was more like relief, like she had been holding her breath since she arrived, and finally allowed herself to breathe. After supper, the men left the table slower than usual. They thanked her, not loudly, not with great speeches, just simple words. But Clara heard them. When the last plate was cleared, Nathan remained in the kitchen. Clara washed the dishes while he stood near the doorway. "You surprised them." She glanced back. "I surprised you too." Nathan did not answer right away. That told her enough. "I didn't expect much," he admitted. Clara dried a plate carefully. Most people don't. The words were quiet, not angry. That somehow made them harder to hear. Nathan looked at her. "You're used to that." She placed the plate on the shelf. "Yes, why?" Clara hesitated. For a moment, Nathan thought she would not answer. Then she said, "Because people usually decide what I can do before they see me do anything." The kitchen became silent. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. Nathan had no clever response, no easy words, so he simply nodded. "I'll see you in the morning." Clara turned back toward the dishes. "Good night, Mr. Hayes." Nathan walked outside, but as he crossed the yard toward his room, he looked back once. The light from the kitchen window stretched across the dark ground. For months, Broken Pine Ranch had felt like a place waiting to collapse. Tonight, for the first time in the long while, it felt like someone had opened a door. Nathan did not know what Clara Whitaker would change. He did not know why a woman everyone else overlooked had managed to bring warmth into a place that had forgotten it, but he knew one thing. The woman he expected to fail had just cooked the best meal anyone had eaten at Broken Pine Ranch in years. Nathan Hayes did not mention it the next morning. That was the first thing Clara noticed. She had expected some kind of comment, maybe a simple acknowledgement, maybe even a quiet thank you. Instead, when Nathan entered the kitchen before sunrise, he removed his gloves, placed them beside the door, and reached for the coffee pot like he had done every morning before she arrived. Only now, the coffee was already waiting. Clara watched him pour it into his tin mug. "You like it strong?" she said. Nathan looked up. "I do. I noticed yesterday you drank the whole cup before leaving." A pause. Then he glanced toward the stove. "You notice a lot?" Clara shrugged lightly. Someone has to. Nathan did not answer, but when he walked out the door a few minutes later, the corner of his mouth moved slightly. It was not quite a smile, but Clara saw it. And for some reason, that small change stayed with her the rest of the morning. The days at Broken Pine Ranch quickly developed a rhythm. Clara woke before the sun reached the mountains. The house was always cold at that hour, the kind of cold that slipped beneath the door cracks and settled into the wooden floors. She learned quickly that the first task of the day was starting the stove. Then came coffee, always coffee first. The ranch hands depended on it. After that came breakfast, biscuits, eggs, when the hens cooperated, salted meat, whatever could be prepared with what the ranch had available. Clara learned the pantry by memory. She learned which shelf held the flour because the bottom board was slightly loose. She learned Nathan preferred his coffee without sugar. She learned Sam Carter talked more before breakfast than after. She learned Eli Turner always left his gloves near the back door and forgot them until someone reminded him. Small things, ordinary things. But those small things slowly made the ranch feel less like a place she was borrowing and more like somewhere she belonged. The men noticed the changes before Nathan admitted he did. One morning, Benjamin Cole stood in the kitchen doorway holding a broken chair leg. Miss Whitaker. Clara looked up from cutting vegetables. Yes? Think you can fix this? She glanced at the chair. I can try. Benjamin nodded and handed it over. A week earlier, he probably would have thrown it away. Now he was asking. That was different. Clara repaired the chair using a small amount of wood from the storage shed and some nails she found in an old toolbox. When Benjamin returned, he ran his hand over the repaired leg. Looks better than new, it's not. He looked at her. It's stronger? Clara smiled slightly. Sometimes things just need attention before they're ready to be thrown away. Benjamin looked at the chair, then at her. He seemed to understand something he did not say. The ranch began changing in ways nobody expected. The kitchen shelves were cleaned. The cracked jars were replaced. The old curtains were washed until they looked almost new. Clara found a stack of unpaid supply receipts tucked inside a drawer near the office. Feed, fence wire, medicine tools. The ranch was not just struggling, it was drowning slowly. She did not mention it at first. It was not her place. But one evening, Nathan came into the kitchen and found her writing numbers on a piece of paper. What's that? Clara looked up. Your expenses, Nathan frowned. My what? You spend more on certain supplies than you need to. He stepped closer. You've been looking through my records. They were in the kitchen drawer. They were? She pointed toward the small cabinet near the wall. Nathan opened it and found the stack exactly where she said. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he rubbed his hand over his face. I forgot those were there. Clara folded the paper. That's why I wrote them down. Nathan looked at the list. You did all this? It wasn't difficult. It's ranch business. Yes. And you think you understand it after being here a few days? Clara looked at him calmly. No. I think I understand numbers. That answer caught him off guard. She continued. I'm not telling you how to run your ranch, Mr. Hayes. But I know what it looks like when someone is trying to stretch too little across too much. Nathan stared at the paper. The truth was, she was right. He hated that she was right, not because she had crossed a line, because she had seen something he had ignored. For years, he had focused on keeping the cattle alive, keeping the fences standing, keeping everyone paid. He had forgotten to look at the small leaks draining the ranch from underneath. You always do this? He asked. Do what? Walk into a place and start fixing things. Clara looked down. No. Then why here? The question came out quieter than he intended. Clara hesitated, because she had an answer, but she was not sure she wanted to give it. Finally, she said, because nobody else was. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. Then he took the paper. "I'll look at it." It was not a thank you, not exactly. But Clara knew enough about Nathan Hayes by then to understand it was close. The next few weeks passed more easily. Not easy. Never easy. The mountains still brought bitter mornings. The cattle still needed tending. The roads into town still became nearly impossible after heavy rain. But the ranch felt different. The men started staying at the table after meals. At first, only for a few minutes, then longer. They talked about weather, about horses, about foolish things they had done when they were younger. Things Nathan had not heard them discuss in months. One evening, Sam leaned back in his chair after finishing supper. "Never thought I'd say this." Nathan looked over. "That usually means I don't want to hear it." Sam ignored him. "This place feels different." Nobody laughed, because everyone knew he was right. Clara continued clearing dishes, pretending she had not heard, but Nathan noticed. He noticed the way she lowered her eyes when people praised her, the way she always served herself last, the way she quietly repaired things before anyone could complain. She had arrived carrying one suitcase, yet somehow she had started carrying pieces of the whole ranch. Nathan began finding reasons to pass through the kitchen. A question about supplies, a comment about the weather, a request for coffee that he could have easily poured himself. He never stayed long, but he stayed. That was new. One morning, Clara caught him standing near the doorway watching her organize the shelves. "What?" Nathan looked away. "Nothing. You've been standing there for almost a minute. I was thinking, that can be dangerous." For a second, Nathan looked almost amused. "Almost. You're different than I expected." Clara placed a jar on the shelf. "Is that good or bad?" Nathan considered the question. Then he answered honestly, "I'm still deciding." She nodded. "That's fair." But after he left, Clara found herself smiling. Because for the first time since arriving in Pine Hollow, someone had looked at her and admitted they were still learning who she was, not judging, not assuming, learning. I did not know that someone else in Pine Hollow had been watching too. Someone who noticed Nathan Hayes spending more time near the house. Someone who noticed the ranch hands respecting the woman everyone had dismissed. Someone who understood that Clara Whitaker was becoming important. And that person did not like it. Across the valley, beneath the polished roof of the Whitmore Ranch, Evelyn Whitmore read the latest letter from her father's old business partner. The words were simple. Broken Pine Ranch had hired a new cook. The men were staying. Nathan Hayes seemed less determined to sell. Evelyn folded the paper slowly. Then she looked out toward the mountains. For years, everyone in Pine Hollow had understood one thing. Nathan Hayes was difficult, proud, stubborn, but predictable. Now there was something unpredictable at Broken Pine Ranch. A woman with a worn suitcase, a woman nobody expected, a woman who had somehow begun changing everything. And Evelyn Whitmore wanted to know why. The Whitmore Ranch sat on the western side of the valley, where the land was greener, the fences were taller, and the buildings showed the kind of care that came from having money behind every decision. Unlike Broken Pine Ranch, nothing at Whitmore Ranch looked forgotten. The barn doors were freshly painted, the equipment was well maintained, the horses wore clean blankets during the colder months. It was the kind of place people in Pine Hollow pointed toward when they talked about success. And Evelyn Whitmore had spent her entire life knowing exactly what that success gave her. Respect, influence, a voice people listened to. She sat in the sitting room of the main house, reading the letter again. Broken Pine Ranch had hired a cook, a woman named Clara Whitaker, a woman with no family name, no land, no money, no connections. Yet somehow, according to the letter, Nathan Hayes had not only kept her on, he had allowed her to change things. Evelyn placed the paper on the table beside her untouched cup of tea. That bothered her more than she wanted to admit. Nathan Hayes had always been difficult, but difficult men had patterns. They could be understood. Nathan was a man who valued pride above comfort. A man who would rather repair a broken fence himself in freezing weather than ask someone for help. He was not supposed to listen to a stranger, especially not someone who had arrived with one suitcase and nothing else. "Miss Evelyn?" She looked up. Her father's ranch manager stood in the doorway. "Yes, Thomas?" The supply invoice from Carson Feed came in. He handed her the paper. She glanced at it without interest. "Anything unusual?" "No." She folded the invoice and set it aside, but her thoughts were somewhere else. Broken Pine Ranch, Nathan Hayes, Clara Whitaker. "What do you know about this woman?" Evelyn asked. Thomas looked uncertain. "The cook? Yes, not much. Came through Pine Hollow about a month ago. Worked at a boarding house before that. Family? None that I heard of." Evelyn leaned back. "And Nathan hired her, so it seems." A quiet pause filled the room. Then Evelyn stood. "Prepare my horse." Thomas hesitated. "Going somewhere?" "Yes, where?" Evelyn picked up her gloves from the table. "Broken Pine Ranch." Clara noticed the change before Nathan mentioned anything. The ranch had become busier, not with more cattle, with more visitors. Men from town stopped by asking questions. Neighbors found reasons to pass through. People who had barely noticed Broken Pine Ranch before suddenly seemed interested in what was happening there. Clara understood enough about small towns to know attention was rarely simple. One afternoon, while she was hanging fresh cloths near the kitchen window, she saw a rider approaching from the valley road. The horse was well groomed. The rider's coat was expensive. Everything about the woman approaching the ranch looked carefully chosen. Nathan was outside near the barn when she arrived. Clara watched from the doorway as the woman removed her gloves. Even from a distance, Clara could tell she belonged to a different world. The woman spoke with confidence. Nathan listened with the same guarded expression he wore when dealing with difficult cattle. Then the woman looked toward the house, toward Clara, and Clara knew immediately. This visit was not about business alone. A few minutes later, Nathan entered the kitchen. "Clara." She turned. "Yes, Evelyn Whitmore is here, I noticed." Nathan paused. "She owns the Whitmore Ranch, I figured." Another pause. Nathan seemed unsure what to say next. That surprised Clara. Nathan Hayes was rarely unsure. "She may stay for supper." Clara nodded. "Then I'll make enough." Nathan looked at her. "You don't have to impress her. I wasn't planning to." A small silence passed. Then Clara added, "I cook for hungry people, Mr. Hayes, not for approval." Nathan looked away, but Clara caught the faintest hint of amusement. Evelyn sat at the dinner table that evening like someone inspecting a business arrangement. She complimented the food, but not warmly. "This is very good," she said. Clara thanked her. "You must have learned quite a lot. My grandmother taught me." How fortunate. The words sounded polite, but something beneath them did not. Nathan noticed. He noticed everything. "You came a long way to discuss cooking?" he asked. Evelyn smiled. "I came to check on my neighbor." Nathan continued eating. "That's all?" She placed her fork down. "You know I've always admired your determination, Nathan." Clara became quiet. She continued serving food, but she listened. "Your father built something impressive here," Evelyn continued. "But everyone knows the ranch has struggled since his passing." Nathan's expression hardened slightly. "We manage. You manage because you refuse to admit when you need help." "I don't need help." Evelyn looked at him. "That's exactly what I mean." She reached into her purse and removed a folded document. Clara saw it. Nathan did too. "My family would be willing to provide financial assistance." Nathan did not touch the paper. "What kind of assistance? A loan arrangement?" "Under what terms?" Evelyn held his gaze. "Partnership." The word sat heavily in the room. Clara lowered her eyes. She already understood. This was not just about money. Nathan understood too. "No." Evelyn blinked. You haven't even looked at the offer. I don't need to, Nathan. Her voice softened, almost pleading. You cannot carry everything alone forever. I've carried it this long, and where has that gotten you? The question landed harder than she probably intended. Nathan became still. Clara saw it, a small change, a wound touched. Evelyn continued, my family could keep Broken Pine Ranch from disappearing. Nathan stood. And what would you want in return? The silence answered before she did. Finally, Evelyn said, someone to build a future with. Clara looked down at the table. She suddenly felt like she was standing somewhere she did not belong. Not because Evelyn said it, because part of her feared it was true. A woman like Evelyn belonged beside Nathan. A woman with land, money, a family name, not someone who carried recipes in an old suitcase. Nathan's voice became colder. My answer is no. Evelyn looked surprised. You would refuse security? I would refuse a deal that isn't a deal. Her expression changed, only slightly, but Clara noticed. You're making things harder than they need to be. Nathan picked up the documents and handed them back. I'm used to hard things. Evelyn took the papers, then she looked at Clara. The smile returned, but it did not reach her eyes. Enjoy your supper, Miss Whitaker. Clara nodded. I hope you have a safe ride home. After Evelyn left, the house felt quieter. Nathan stood near the window watching her horse disappear down the road. Clara cleaned the table slowly. You should have taken the offer. Nathan turned. What? You need the money. That doesn't mean I need her money. Clara folded the cloth in her hands. Maybe someone like her could actually help you. Nathan studied her. Someone like her? Clara stopped. She realized what she had said. That's not what I meant. But Nathan heard the sadness beneath the words. What did you mean? Clara looked away. Nothing. He wanted to ask, but he didn't. Nathan had spent years learning how to fight. He had never learned how to reach through someone else's walls. That night, Clara sat alone in her small room upstairs. The recipe book lay open beside her. She looked at the familiar handwriting of her grandmother. Words written by a woman who had spent her life creating comfort from almost nothing. Clara touched the page. For the first time since arriving at Broken Pine Ranch, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Maybe she had confused being needed with belonging. Maybe she had mistaken kindness for a place in someone's life. Downstairs, Nathan sat at the kitchen table long after the fire burned low. He looked toward the stairs. He thought about Clara's quiet voice. The way she had stepped aside when Evelyn entered the room. The way she always seemed ready to leave before anyone asked her to. And for the first time, Nathan wondered if the hardest thing to repair at Broken Pine Ranch was not the fences, or the finances, or the failing equipment. Maybe it was convincing one stubborn woman that she was not a burden. And far across the valley, Evelyn Whitmore folded her gloves beside the window and watched the lights of Broken Pine Ranch fade into the darkness. She had offered Nathan a solution. He had refused. Now she wanted to know what or who had given him the courage to say no. For several days after Evelyn Whitmore's visit, Clara noticed a quiet change in Nathan. Not a bad change, just a careful one. He worked longer hours. He spent more time checking the fences and less time sitting at the kitchen table after supper. When Clara brought him coffee in the morning, he thanked her. When she asked about the ranch accounts, he answered. But something between them had shifted, not broken, just unsettled. Clara understood why. Evelyn Whitmore was everything Clara was not. She had land, a respected family, a name that opened doors before she even knocked. Clara had a recipe book with worn pages and a suitcase that had traveled farther than she ever expected. That difference stayed in her mind more than she wanted it to. So she did what she had always done when life became uncertain. She worked. The kitchen became her answer. She focused on what she could control. The garden behind the house was small and stubborn, but Clara spent early mornings clearing weeds and saving what plants she could. She dried herbs near the window. She made careful notes about supplies. She learned which ingredients could last through the winter and which ones needed to be used quickly. One afternoon, while sorting through a box of jars in the cellar, she found several empty glass containers. She turned one over in her hands. Then she remembered the wild berries growing near the northern edge of the property. By the end of the week, the kitchen shelves held rows of preserves: strawberry, blackberry, wild mountain plum, nothing fancy, just honest food made from what the land offered. Nathan noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything, even when he pretended not to. "You're using more sugar than usual," he said one evening as he looked over the kitchen shelves. Clara glanced up. "I know." "Why?" "Because people like sweet things." Nathan looked at the jars. "You planning to feed the whole territory?" "No." She smiled faintly. "Just trying to make something useful." Nathan leaned against the doorway. "You always do that?" "Do what?" "Find a way to make something useful out of almost nothing." Clara looked back at the jars. "My grandmother did." A quiet moment passed. Nathan nodded once, then he left. But the next morning, Clara found a new wooden shelf installed beneath the kitchen window. She knew Nathan had built it. He had not mentioned it. He did not need to. The small act said enough. The harvest gathering in Pine Hollow arrived near the end of September. It was one of the few times during the year when the entire valley came together. Farmers brought vegetables, ranchers brought meat, families sold handmade goods, the main street filled with wagons, children, music, and the smell of fresh bread drifting from the outdoor kitchens. Clara had no intention of entering any contest. She was there only because Sam convinced her. "You've been making those jars all month," he said while helping load supplies into the wagon. "Selling a few would help the ranch." Clara tied a cloth around a basket. "I don't think people are interested in buying things from me." Sam stopped. "Why?" She looked at him. He seemed genuinely confused. "You've tasted your own cooking, haven't you?" "That's different." "How?" Clara opened her mouth, then closed it. Sam nodded. "That's what I thought." Eli, standing nearby, laughed. "She's got no answer for that." Clara shook her head. "You men are very confident for people who burned biscuits 3 times before I arrived. That happened once, 3 times. Details. For the first time, Clara laughed. A real laugh. And Nathan, who had been walking toward the wagon, heard it. He stopped for a second. Not because it was unusual for someone to laugh, because he realized he had never heard Clara laugh before. Not like that. Not freely. She noticed him watching. The moment lasted only a second. Then Nathan looked away and picked up a crate. "Need help loading?" Clara blinked. "Yes." And that was all he said. But he stayed until everything was packed. The Pine Hollow harvest gathering was larger than Clara expected. She stood behind a small wooden table with her jars arranged neatly. At first, people walked past. Some looked. Some whispered. She recognized several faces from the day she arrived. The same people who had watched her step off the stagecoach. The same people who had decided what she was before speaking to her. Then an older woman stopped. She picked up a jar of blackberry preserves. "How much?" Clara almost looked behind herself to see if the woman meant someone else. $2 for 3 jars. The woman nodded. "I'll take 3. That small purchase changed something. Not all at once, not like a storybook miracle, just enough." Another person stopped, then another. Soon people were asking questions. "What kind of berries are these? How do you keep them from spoiling? Did you make all this yourself?" Clara answered each one, slowly, patiently. By midday, half the jars were gone, then came the cooking contest. Clara had entered her grandmother's old apple pie recipe almost as an afterthought. She stood near the back of the crowd while the judges tasted each entry. When they reached hers, she watched carefully. The first judge took a bite, then another. The second judge looked surprised. Finally, the town baker, a man who had been making bread in Pine Hollow for 20 years, nodded. "This is good." Only 3 words, but from him, it meant something. The crowd waited. The judges announced the winner. Clara Whitaker. For a moment, Clara did not move. She thought she had heard wrong. Sam smiled. "Go on." She stepped forward. People clapped, some politely, some genuinely. She accepted the small ribbon with both hands. It was not a grand prize. It was not wealth. But holding that ribbon felt like holding proof. Proof that she was more than what people assumed. Then Nathan stepped forward. He had been standing near the edge of the crowd. Quiet. Watching. "I knew it was good," he said. Clara looked at him. "You did?" "I tasted it. That was before the judges." Nathan glanced around at the crowd, then back at her. Everyone at Broken Pine Ranch already knew. The words were simple, but people heard them, the way he said them, the way he looked at her. There was no embarrassment, no hesitation, just respect. A few people nearby exchanged looks, and Clara noticed Evelyn Whitmore standing across the street, watching. Her expression was unreadable. That evening, when Clara returned to the ranch, Nathan helped unload the remaining supplies. "You didn't have to say that," she said. Nathan looked at her. "Say what? That the ranch needed me?" He set down the crate. "It does." Clara looked away. "People will talk." Nathan was quiet. Then he said, "People always talk." She looked back at him. "And that doesn't bother you?" Nathan held her gaze. "No." The answer came too quickly, almost before he could think. Then he stepped away. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be busy." Clara watched him walk toward the barn. Her heart felt strangely unsettled, not because something was wrong, because something was changing. She just did not know what to call it. But Evelyn Whitmore did. She had watched Nathan Hayes reject money. She had watched him defend Clara without realizing he was doing it. And now she had watched an entire town begin seeing what she had tried to ignore. Clara Whitaker was no longer the woman everyone overlooked. She was becoming someone people noticed. And Evelyn Whitmore had spent too many years protecting her place in Pine Hollow to let that happen quietly. The first few days after the harvest gathering felt different at Broken Pine Ranch. Not because the work had changed. The cattle still needed feeding before sunrise. The fences still needed repairing. The mountain wind still found every crack in the old ranch buildings and pushed cold air through the walls at night. But something had shifted. People in town no longer looked at Clara Whitaker as if she had simply wandered into a place where she did not belong. They stopped her outside the general store. They asked about her preserves. They asked when she would make more of her apple pies. One afternoon, the owner of the Pine Hollow Diner placed an order for 6 jars of blackberry preserves. Clara returned to the ranch carrying the receipt folded carefully in her coat pocket. She looked at it several times during the ride home, not because the amount was large, it was not, but because it was the first money she had earned from something that belonged entirely to her. Nathan noticed the small paper when she set her gloves down. "You sold some?" Clara nodded. "The diner." He picked up the receipt, looked at it, and handed it back. "That's good." She smiled slightly. "It's only a few dollars." Nathan shook his head. "It's more than that." Clara looked at him. But before she could ask what he meant, Nathan turned toward the barn. That was something she had started noticing about him. He often said the important things when he was already walking away. For a while, the ranch felt almost peaceful. The men worked harder, not because Nathan demanded it, because they wanted to. Sam Carter started fixing the loose boards around the kitchen porch without being asked. Eli Turner repaired the old stovepipe that had smoked every time the wind changed direction. Benjamin Cole even admitted that Clara's biscuits were better than his mother's. Then he quickly added that his mother would have disagreed. Ranch hands laughed, and Clara found herself standing in the doorway, watching them with a quiet smile. Months earlier, this place had been nothing but a job, a place where she hoped to survive. Now there were moments when she caught herself feeling something she had almost forgotten: belonging. But she also noticed Nathan growing quieter. Some evenings, after supper, he would sit at the far end of the table with the ranch ledgers open. The lamp beside him would burn late into the night. Numbers, receipts, bills, pages filled with notes. Clara never asked unless he invited her. She understood pride. She knew what it felt like to struggle and not want anyone to see. But one night, when she found him still awake after everyone had gone to bed, she paused beside the table. "You're going to wear a hole through those papers." Nathan looked up. A faint smile crossed his face. "That bad? You've been staring at the same page for 10 minutes. He glanced down. He had. Clara placed a fresh cup of coffee beside him. "You don't have to tell me." Nathan looked at the cup, then at her. "I'm trying to figure out how to keep this place running through winter." "You will." He gave a small breath of a laugh. "You sound certain." "I am." "Why?" Clara looked toward the dark window. Outside, snow clouds were beginning to gather above the mountains. "Because you've been trying to save this ranch every day since I arrived." Nathan watched her. "And you think that's enough?" "No." She shook her head. "I think you finally stopped trying to do it alone." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Nathan lowered his eyes. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was something else. Something neither of them was ready to name. But not everyone in Pine Hollow liked the changes at Broken Pine Ranch, especially not those who had spent years believing they understood Nathan Hayes. The rumors began quietly. That was how rumors usually started. At the back table of the general store, near the hitching posts outside the diner, around the stove at the local feed office. Nobody said anything directly to Clara at first. They only lowered their voices when she walked by. Sam noticed before she did. "Don't pay attention." Clara looked up from sorting flour sacks. "Pay attention to what?" Sam hesitated. That was answer enough. She set the sack down. "Sam," he rubbed the back of his neck. "People talk. They always have." "Yeah." He looked toward the window, but now they're talking about Nathan. Clara stayed still. "What are they saying?" Sam did not answer immediately. Finally, he said, "They think he's helping you because he feels sorry for you." The words landed harder than Clara expected. Not because they were cruel, because some part of her had already wondered the same thing. She turned back to the shelves. "I see." Sam frowned. "That's not what I meant. I know." She carefully lined up the jars. "I know what you meant." But she did not say what she was thinking. That maybe Nathan had lost opportunities because of her. That maybe Evelyn Whitmore was right about one thing. Nathan had a future beyond a struggling ranch. And Clara had arrived carrying nothing but a suitcase and a recipe book. A few days later, Evelyn came to the ranch again. This time she did not arrive with paperwork. She arrived alone. Her horse stopped near the front gate as the afternoon sun stretched shadows across the fields. Nathan was repairing a fence when he saw her. His expression changed immediately, not anger, not surprise, just caution. "Evelyn." She removed her gloves. "Lan." The two stood several feet apart. Neither moved closer. "I heard the town has been celebrating your cook." Nathan continued working. "She deserves it." Evelyn studied him. "What you believe?" Nathan looked at her. Yes, the answer was simple. Too simple. Evelyn glanced toward the ranch house. "She's changed this place. She has. She's made you forget what you're risking." Nathan drove the hammer against the fence post. The sound echoed across the field. "You came here to talk about my ranch?" "No." Evelyn paused. I came because I'm trying to understand something. Nathan waited. How does a man like you look at a woman like that and decide she belongs here? For the moment, the only sound was the wind moving through the grass. Nathan set the hammer down. You should leave. Evelyn's face tightened. You won't even deny it? Deny what? That you've chosen her. Nathan did not answer, and somehow that silence told her more than words could have. Evelyn turned her horse away, but before leaving, she looked back. This valley forgets quickly, Nathan. He watched her disappear down the road. Then he returned to the fence, but his hand stayed on the hammer for a long time without moving. That evening, Clara found him sitting alone near the barn. The sunset painted the mountains orange and gold. She carried 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one for herself. She sat beside him, leaving enough space between them. You had company today. Nathan looked at her. Who told you? Pine Hollow has many things. A small smile touched his face. True. They sat quietly. Then Clara spoke. Was she right? Nathan frowned. About what? That I'm making things harder for you. Nathan looked away. The question seemed to surprise him. Clara, I know what people see. She held the coffee cup with both hands. They see a woman who needed a place. They see a man who gave her one. Nathan studied her face. And what do you see? She did not answer, because she was afraid of the answer. The wind moved through the dry grass. Finally, Nathan said quietly, You think I hired you because I felt sorry for you. Clara lowered her eyes. I don't know what to think. Nathan looked toward the ranch house, then back at her. Neither do I. It was not the answer she expected, but it was honest. And somehow that hurt more. That night, Clara opened her grandmother's recipe book. She ran her fingers over the faded handwriting. For the first time since arriving at Broken Pine Ranch, she wondered if staying was selfish, if she had mistaken kindness for a place she had earned. And before sunrise, while the ranch was still sleeping, Clara quietly pulled her worn leather suitcase from beneath the bed. She began folding her clothes, not because she wanted to leave, because she believed leaving might be the only way to stop hurting the man who had given her a chance. The old wooden floor beneath Clara Whitaker's boots creaked softly as she moved through the small room she had been given at Broken Pine Ranch. Outside, the ranch was still asleep. The horses shifted quietly in the barn. The wind moved through the pine trees behind the house. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called once before the morning settled back into silence. Clara folded her last dress and placed it inside the worn leather suitcase she had carried into Pine Hollow. The same suitcase she had arrived with, the same suitcase that had held everything she owned. She looked at the small recipe book sitting on the table. Her grandmother's handwriting filled the old pages. Notes about biscuits, stews, preserves, simple meals made for people who worked long days and came home tired. Clara gently closed the cover. She had come to Broken Pine Ranch, believing she was searching for a job. Somewhere along the way, she had found something much more dangerous, a place she wanted to keep, a person she did not want to lose. And that was exactly why she had to go. Nathan found out before sunrise, not because Clara told him, because Sam Carter saw the packed suitcase near the doorway. He walked into the kitchen, removed his hat, and stared at it for a moment. Is she leaving? Nathan looked up from the coffee he was pouring. The question was enough, he knew. A few minutes later, he found Clara near the barn. She was carrying a small bundle of supplies and tying it to her horse. The morning air was cold enough that her breath appeared in front of her. Clara, she stopped, but she did not turn around immediately. Nathan walked closer. You're leaving. She tightened the rope around the saddle. I think it's best. For who? The question made her hands pause. She looked at him. For you. Nathan stood still. The man who could face angry cattle and harsh winters without hesitation suddenly seemed unsure what to say. That doesn't make sense. Clara gave a small, sad smile. It does. No. His voice was quiet. But you believe it does. She looked down. Nathan, people are talking because of me. People have always talked. They're talking about you and you have a ranch to protect. Nathan stepped closer. You think you're the reason my ranch is struggling? Clara swallowed. I think I became another problem you have to carry. For a moment, Nathan said nothing. Then he looked toward the fields, the same fields he had spent years trying to save. I lost workers because this place was falling apart. Clara listened. I lost money because I was too stubborn to ask for help. He looked back at her. But you, his voice softened. You came here with one suitcase and a recipe book. You walked into a place nobody wanted to live in, and you made people remember why they stayed. Clara looked away. That doesn't change what people think. Nathan shook his head. No, it changes what I think. The words stayed between them. Neither moved. Then a distant sound broke the silence. A rider approaching from the direction of Pine Hollow. Nathan turned. A moment later, Sam appeared near the gate. Town meeting, he called. Nathan frowned. Kind of meeting? Sam removed his gloves, the kind where nobody asked you if you wanted one. By noon, nearly everyone in Pine Hollow had gathered inside the small town hall. The building was plain, wooden benches, a cracked stove in the corner, a faded American flag hanging behind the front table. People came in wearing their work clothes, farmers, ranch hands, store owners, neighbors who had known each other for years. Clara stood near the back beside Sam, Eli, and Benjamin. She had wanted to stay away. Nathan had insisted she come. You don't hide because other people are uncomfortable, he had told her. She still wasn't sure she believed him. At the front of the room stood Evelyn Whitmore. She looked perfectly composed. Her dark green coat was clean despite the muddy roads outside. Her gloves rested neatly in her hands. When Nathan walked in, she watched him carefully. Thank you all for coming, Evelyn said. A few people exchanged looks. Everyone knew Evelyn did not call meetings without a reason. I think we need to discuss what is happening at Broken Pine Ranch. Nathan stepped forward. There is nothing happening that concerns you. Evelyn smiled slightly. That's not true. She turned toward the crowd. For years, everyone in this valley respected Nathan Hayes. He worked hard. He carried his father's name with pride. Nathan's jaw tightened. Then Evelyn looked toward Clara. But lately, things have changed. The room became quiet. Clara felt every pair of eyes turn toward her. Evelyn continued. A woman arrives from another town. She has no family here, no land, no connections. Her voice remained calm, but suddenly Nathan changes his decisions. He turns away offers that could save his ranch. He risks his future. A whisper moved through the crowd. Clara looked down, not because she agreed, because she had heard those words before. Different voices, same judgment. Nathan took a step forward. That's enough. Evelyn looked at him. Is it? She faced the crowd again. Maybe everyone here deserves to know why. Nathan's expression hardened, but before he could speak, Clara stepped forward. The room went quiet. She had spent years letting people decide who she was before they knew her. She was tired. I know what you see when you look at me. Her voice was steady. You see someone who doesn't belong here. Nobody spoke. You see a woman who arrived with nothing. She glanced briefly toward Nathan. And maybe that's true. Nathan looked at her. But you don't know what I carried with me. Her fingers touched the edge of her coat. I carried every place where I was told I was too much, too large, too ordinary, too unwanted. The room stayed silent, but I also carried my grandmother's recipes, my work, my hands. She looked around, and I came here willing to earn my place. Evelyn watched her carefully. Clara continued, "I never asked Nathan Hayes to choose me." Her eyes moved toward him. "I never asked him to give me anything." A pause. "I only asked for a chance." Then Nathan stepped beside her. Not in front, beside. That small movement said more than any speech could. "I was offered money." Everyone looked at him. Nathan continued, "I was offered help." He looked at Evelyn, but every offer came with a price. Evelyn's expression changed slightly. Nathan faced the crowd. "I know what this ranch is worth." He glanced around the room. "I know what I could lose." Then he looked at Clara. "But I also know what I almost lost before she came here." His voice lowered. "This ranch was not dying because I lacked money." A silence filled the room. "It was dying because I forgot it was supposed to be a home." Clara looked at him. Nathan turned back to the crowd. "Clara Whitaker did not come here asking to be rescued." He paused. "She came here and helped save something I had nearly given up on." Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Even Evelyn had no immediate answer. Nathan had chosen, not because it was easy, not because everyone approved, because it was right. The meeting ended without a decision. People left slowly. Some looked uncertain, some looked ashamed, some simply looked thoughtful. Outside, snow began falling lightly over Pine Hollow. Clara stood near the steps. "You shouldn't have done that." Nathan looked at her. "Done what?" "Risked everything." He looked toward the street, then back at her. "Clara," she waited, I already risked everything." The wind moved between them. "When I let this ranch become empty, I lost more than money." His eyes met hers. "I don't want to lose it again." Clara's eyes lowered. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to stop fighting the kindness she had been given. Nathan reached down and picked up her suitcase, the one she had packed before sunrise. He carried it back toward the ranch house. He did not ask her to stay. He simply carried it. And Clara followed. Behind them, Pine Hollow watched. Some still doubted, some still judged. But something had changed. The woman they once whispered about was no longer standing alone. And the cowboy everyone thought would never bend had just shown the entire valley exactly what kind of man he was. But choosing Clara did not make Nathan Hayes' problems disappear. If anything, it seemed to bring them closer. The morning after the town meeting, Broken Pine Ranch woke beneath a blanket of fresh snow. The mountains beyond the grazing fields stood silent and white, their peaks hidden behind low clouds. Smoke drifted from the ranch house chimney as Clara prepared breakfast. But something felt different. Not inside the kitchen, outside. The ranch hands moved with more caution. Nathan checked the gates twice before breakfast. Sam rode the eastern fence line before the sun had fully risen. Nobody said why. They did not need to. Everyone knew that when a man with powerful enemies chooses a difficult road, the road rarely becomes easier. For several weeks, Broken Pines Ranch held together through determination alone. Clara continued working beside the men. She kept the kitchen organized. She wrote down every supply purchase. She saved every receipt in a wooden box beside the pantry shelves. It was a habit she had learned from her grandmother. "Paper remembers what people forget," her grandmother used to say. At the time, Clara never thought those words would matter. Now they did, because things were starting to disappear. First, it was a shipment of fence posts that never arrived. The supplier in Denver claimed Nathan's order had been canceled. Nathan had never canceled it. Then a wagon carrying grain was delayed for nearly 2 weeks. When it finally reached the ranch, half the sacks were damaged from sitting in the weather. Nathan stood beside the barn, holding the torn delivery paper in his hand. "This doesn't make sense." Sam looked over his shoulder. "Could be the driver made a mistake." Nathan shook his head. "Not this many mistakes." Clara watched from the porch. She noticed something the others did not. Nathan was not angry. He was worried. That concerned her more. A few days later, Nathan found 3 cattle missing from the northern pasture. It was not unusual for an animal to wander. The land around Broken Pine Ranch stretched for miles, but these cattle had not simply escaped. The fence had been cut, not broken. Cut. Nathan ran his hand along the damaged wire. The cold metal left a mark across his glove. Sam stood beside him. Someone did this. Nathan looked across the open field. The snow carried no clear tracks, only wind and empty land. I know. The 2 men stood there quietly. They had both spent years fighting against weather, hunger, and bad luck. But this was different. Bad luck did not cut fences. That evening, Clara noticed Nathan sitting alone at the kitchen table. The ledgers were open, receipts were spread across the wood. The lamp cast a small circle of light around him. She placed a cup of coffee beside his papers. You missed supper. Nathan looked up. I wasn't hungry. Clara looked at the untouched plate beside him. You haven't been hungry much lately. A faint smile crossed his face. You notice everything. She sat across from him. Someone has to. For a moment, Nathan looked like he wanted to say something. Then he looked down at the papers. I'm trying to find where this started. Clara glanced at the receipts. What do you mean? Money doesn't vanish overnight. He tapped the papers. There's a pattern. She leaned closer. Nathan moved some documents aside. Orders changed. Deliveries delayed. Payments redirected. Clara studied the handwriting. Who handles these? Mostly suppliers. Mostly? Nathan looked at her. She pointed to a receipt. This signature. He leaned closer. What about it? It's different. Nathan frowned. What do you mean? Clara picked up the paper carefully, the way the letters are written. She pointed. Your supplier always writes the number 7 with a line through it. This one doesn't. Nathan stared at the receipt. A small detail, something most people would never notice. But Clara noticed, because she had spent years reading handwriting on bills, letters, and orders. Could be someone else at the company. Maybe. Looked at him. But maybe someone wanted it to look like them. Nathan was quiet. Then he reached across the table and placed the receipt back in the pile. You may have just found something I missed. Clara lowered her eyes. I'm just a cook. Nathan shook his head. No, the answer came quickly, too quickly. You're the person who keeps seeing what everyone else ignores. The room became quiet. Clara looked at him. Nathan seemed to realize what he had said. He cleared his throat and looked back at the papers, but Clara noticed the small smile he tried to hide. The next morning, Nathan rode into Pine Hollow with Deputy William Foster. William had known Nathan since they were boys. He had been there when Nathan's father first built the ranch house. He had also been one of the few people who stayed when the ranch began struggling. Inside the small sheriff's office, the stove burned low. William looked over the documents Nathan brought. This is more than carelessness. Nathan leaned against the desk. That's what I thought. William turned another page. These missing shipments, the altered records. He looked up. Someone is trying to make it appear like your ranch is failing. Nathan's expression hardened. Why? William sat back. Because a failing ranch is easier to buy. The words settled heavily. Nathan already knew the answer before William said it. Whitmore. William did not respond immediately. He did not need to. The silence was enough. Meanwhile, Clara stayed at the ranch. She worked in the kitchen. She spoke with the ranch hands. She listened. People often forgot that the person serving coffee heard more conversations than the person sitting at the table. That afternoon, one of the supply wagons arrived. The driver, a tired man named Robert Miller, removed his hat when Clara approached. Mrs. Hayes. Clara paused. She was not used to hearing that. I'm not Mrs. Hayes. The driver looked embarrassed. Sorry, I just assumed. Clara smiled politely. It's all right. He handed her the delivery papers. Need a signature? She looked down, then stopped. The paper showed the wrong amount of supplies. Again. Clara looked at the driver. Did you load this yourself? He nodded. Yes, ma'am. Then why does this say 20 sacks when you brought 30? The driver looked confused. I don't know. Clara folded the paper. Neither do I. That night, Clara told Nathan everything. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he stood by the window for a long time. Finally, he said, You were right. Clara shook her head. We were right. Nathan looked back at her. A small change, but an important one. He was no longer speaking as if this was his fight alone. The ranch was theirs, the problem was theirs, the future was theirs. But before they could uncover the truth, someone else was already moving. And this time, they were not hiding behind paperwork. They were sending a message. The next morning, Nathan found something nailed to the barn door, a single piece of paper, no name, no signature, only a warning, leave Broken Pine Ranch or lose everything. Nathan stared at the words. The winter wind moved through the empty fields behind him, and for the first time in years, he was not afraid of losing his land. He was afraid of losing the people who had made it worth saving. Nathan Hayes stood in front of the barn door for several minutes after reading the warning. The paper moved slightly in the winter wind. The words were simple. Leave Broken Pine Ranch or lose everything. He had seen threats before. Men angry over cattle disputes, neighbors upset over boundary lines, ranchers who believed a hard stare and a loaded reputation could solve any problem. But this was different, because whoever had written those words knew exactly where to hurt him. Not the land, not the cattle, the people. Nathan pulled the paper from the door and folded it carefully. Then he walked back toward the ranch house. Clara was standing by the kitchen window when he entered. She saw his face before he said a word. What happened? Nathan placed the paper on the table. Clara read it silently. Her fingers rested on the edge of the page. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the fire burning in the stove. They know, she whispered. Nathan looked at her. They. Clara looked toward the window. Whoever is doing this, she folded the paper. They know what matters to you now. Nathan did not answer, because she was right. The next few days, Broken Pine Ranch became a place of careful movements. The ranch hands stopped riding alone. The gates were checked every morning. The lanterns around the barn were filled before sunset. Nobody panicked. That was not how Nathan ran his ranch. But nobody ignored the danger either. Sam Carter leaned against the fence one afternoon, while Nathan repaired a broken hinge. You know, there was a time when you would have handled this yourself. Nathan kept working. There was a time when I thought that was the right way. Sam nodded toward the ranch house. And now? Nathan looked through the window. Clara was inside preparing dinner. She moved around the kitchen with the same calm focus she had shown since the day she arrived. She had no weapon, no power, no family name that carried weight in the valley. Yet somehow, she had become the strongest person on the ranch. Now, Nathan said quietly, I know better. Deputy William Foster returned 2 days later with more information. He arrived just before noon, his horse covered in road dust. Nathan met him near the gate. You found something? William removed his gloves. Maybe. The two men walked toward the office. Clara watched from the porch. She had learned enough about Nathan to know that when he walked slowly, it usually meant his mind was moving fast. Inside the office, William placed several papers on the desk. I checked the supply companies. Nathan looked through them. Anything? One of the accounts has been using a third-party buyer. Nathan frowned. Who? William looked at him. Someone connected to the Whitmore cattle operation. The room became quiet. Nathan stared at the papers. Evelyn, not directly. William paused. But someone working for her family. Nathan leaned back. For years, the Whitmores had controlled the largest cattle operation in the valley. They had money, connections, influence. But he never imagined they would go this far. Can we prove it? Not yet. William gathered the papers. We need something stronger. Nathan looked toward the window. Outside, the ranch continued as if nothing was wrong. The horses, the fields, the people. Everything he had almost lost. We'll find it. William studied him. You sound different. Nathan looked over. How? You sound like a man protecting a home. Nathan did not respond because he knew exactly when that had changed. The day Clara Whitaker walked through his kitchen door carrying a worn suitcase and a recipe book. That evening, snow began falling again. Heavy clouds covered the mountains, the kind of weather that kept people close to their homes. Clara finished preparing supper while the men came in from the cold. Steam rose from bowls on the table. Coats hung near the door. Boots left wet marks on the wooden floor. For a brief moment, Broken Pine Ranch felt normal, almost peaceful. Nathan watched Clara laugh quietly when Benjamin complained that Sam had taken the largest piece of cornbread. You always take the biggest one, Benjamin said. Sam shrugged, because I'm faster. Clara shook her head. You're both acting like children. The men laughed. Nathan found himself smiling, a small smile. The kind he rarely allowed himself before. Then later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Clara found him outside checking the barn. You should sleep, Nathan turned. So should you. She walked closer. The snow fell lightly around them. You don't have to stand guard every night. Nathan looked toward the dark fields. I do. Clara was quiet. Then she said, because of me. Nathan turned immediately. No, the answer came before he even thought. Never because of you, she looked at him. Then because of what? Nathan looked back at the ranch house. Because this is the first place in a long time where I don't feel alone. Clara did not say anything, she simply stood beside him. And for a while neither of them moved. The storm came 3 nights later. The kind of storm that swallowed the mountains and turned the roads into white emptiness. The wind pushed against the ranch buildings. The horses grew restless. Nathan woke sometime after midnight. At first he thought it was the wind. Then he smelled smoke. He was out of bed before he fully understood what was happening. Fire! His voice cut through the darkness. The ranch exploded into motion. Sam, Eli, Benjamin, Farwan ran outside. The barn was glowing against the night sky. Flames climbed along the wooden walls. The horses inside were panicking. Nathan grabbed a coat and ran toward the entrance. Nathan? Clara's voice stopped him for half a second. He turned. She stood in the snow, her hair uncovered, fear in her eyes. Don't. Nathan looked at the burning barn, then back at her. There are animals inside. Before anyone could stop him, he moved toward the door. The smoke was thick. The heat pushed against him. Outside, the ranch hands worked together, pulling equipment away and opening a safe path for the horses. Minutes felt like hours. Then Nathan appeared through the smoke, leading one frightened horse outside, another, then another, until finally the last animal was safe. But Nathan did not come out with them. A moment passed, then another. Clara felt every person around her go silent. Chatsam moved forward. Then Nathan appeared. He stumbled through the doorway. The men rushed toward him. Clara reached him first. He was exhausted. Cold snow covered his coat. But he was standing. Are you hurt? Nathan looked at her. For a moment, he seemed more concerned about answering her than himself. I'm fine. Clara looked at the damaged barn behind him. No. Her voice was quiet. You're not. By morning, the fire was out. The barn stood damaged and broken. The snow around it was covered with ashes. The ranch was quiet, too quiet. William arrived shortly after sunrise. He walked around the remains carefully. Then he stopped. This wasn't an accident. Nathan looked at him. How sure are you? William pointed toward the side of the barn. The fire started in 2 places. Nobody spoke. Clara looked at Nathan. The message was clear. Someone had not just tried to scare them. Someone had tried to destroy them. And standing among the ashes of the barn, with the winter wind moving through the empty fields, they all understood the same thing. The fight for Broken Pine Ranch had only just begun. For the first time in many years, Nathan Hayes looked at the land around him and saw more than damage. He saw what remained. The ranch house still stood. The cattle were safe. The people he cared about were standing beside him. But the empty space where the barn had been was a reminder that someone out there wanted Broken Pine Ranch to disappear. And they were not finished. The days after the fire were the hardest the ranch had seen. The men worked from sunrise until dark. They cleared burned boards, repaired damaged fencing, moved supplies into temporary storage buildings. Every hammer strike against fresh wood sounded like a quiet answer. They were still here. They had not been pushed away. Clara spent those days doing what she always did. She worked. The kitchen became the center of the ranch once again. The stove stayed warm. Coffee was always ready before the men returned from the fields. She kept lists of what was needed: food, tools, building supplies, medicine. Every receipt went into the wooden box beside the pantry. But something about her had changed. Before the fire, Clara had tried to make herself smaller. She had spoken softly, stayed out of difficult conversations, avoided being noticed. Now she walked through the ranch with a different kind of purpose, not louder, not harder, just certain. Nathan noticed. He noticed when she rode into town with Sam to collect supplies. He noticed when she questioned a merchant about missing items on a bill. He noticed when she sat beside him at the kitchen table at night and studied the ranch records. She was no longer simply helping him, she was standing with him. One evening, Nathan found her in the office. A single lamp burned beside her. Papers covered the desk. She looked up when he entered. You should be sleeping. Nathan smiled faintly. You say that often. Because you ignore good advice often. He stepped closer. What are you looking for? Clara held up a stack of papers. Connections. Nathan looked confused. Connections? Every problem has a person behind it. She tapped the documents, these deliveries, the altered receipts, the missing cattle. She looked at him. They all benefit someone. Nathan leaned against the desk. You've been thinking about this. Yes, why? Clara looked down at the papers. Because everyone thinks I'm harmless. Nathan stayed quiet. She continued. They see the woman who cooks meals and keeps the house clean. They don't think I notice anything else. A small pause. That can be useful. Nathan watched her carefully. For years, he had believed strength looked like his father, a man standing in a field with a rifle and a stubborn expression. But Clara had shown him another kind, the kind that listened, the kind that waited, the kind that noticed what everyone else missed. You shouldn't have to fight this, he said. Clara looked at him. I'm not fighting because I have to. She placed the papers down. I'm fighting because this is my home too. Nathan did not answer. He simply nodded. And for once, he did not argue. 2 days later, Nathan tried to convince her to leave. It happened early in the morning. The sun had barely risen above the mountains. The ranch was quiet except for the sound of horses in the distance. Clara was packing supplies into a small bag when Nathan entered the kitchen. Where are you going? She turned. Pine Hollow. Why? To ask questions. Nathan shook his head. No. The firmness in his voice surprised her. Why not? Because whoever did this already knows you matter here. Clara looked at him. That's exactly why I need to go. No. Nathan stepped closer. You don't understand what they're willing to do. Her expression changed. Not anger, something deeper. You think I don't understand danger? Nathan stopped. Clara lowered her voice. I spent years walking into rooms where people decided I wasn't worth knowing before they heard my name. The kitchen became silent. I know what it feels like when people decide your place for you. Nathan looked away, because he knew he had once been one of those people. Not cruel, but distant, judging too quickly. Clara picked up her coat. I didn't stay here because this ranch was safe. She looked at him. I stayed because it was the first place where I wasn't treated like I had something to prove. Nathan's expression softened. You don't have to prove anything. Clara shook her head. No, a small smile appeared. But someone has to prove who is trying to destroy this place. That afternoon, Clara went into Pine Hollow, not as a woman seeking approval, as a woman with a purpose. She visited the general store, the feed supplier, the small office where delivery records were kept. She asked simple questions, the kind people answered because they did not think they mattered. The store clerk remembered a man who had recently changed Nathan's order. The feed supplier remembered a payment made through another account. A ranch worker at the edge of town remembered seeing unfamiliar riders near Broken Pine Ranch before the fire. Piece by piece, the story began to form, and nobody suspected the woman collecting the pieces because they were still seeing the same Clara they had mocked months earlier. The woman carrying flour sacks, the woman making pies, the woman they believed only belonged in a kitchen. They did not realize the kitchen had taught her patience, and patience was exactly what she needed. That night, Nathan found her sitting on the porch with her notes. The snow had stopped, the sky was clear. Stars filled the space above the mountains. You went anyway, Clara looked up. Yes, he sat beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nathan said, I was angry, I know. I thought protecting you meant keeping you away from this. Clara looked toward the fields. And now? Nathan looked at the ranch, the broken barn, the repaired fences, the warm light coming from the house. Now I think I was wrong. Clara turned toward him. Nathan continued. I spent years believing a man had to carry every burden alone. He paused. You showed me that was just another way of being afraid. The words surprised her, because Nathan Hayes was not a man who admitted mistakes easily. Clara smiled slightly. That sounded almost like an apology. It was. She looked at him. I'll remember this moment. Nathan shook his head. You probably will. They both laughed quietly. A small sound, a normal sound, the kind of sound that felt impossible a few days earlier. But peace did not last. The next morning, William Foster arrived at Broken Pine Ranch with a serious expression. Nathan knew immediately something had happened. What is it? William removed a folded document from his coat. I found the connection. Nathan took the paper. Clara stepped closer. William pointed to the signature at the bottom. This man worked for the Whitmore operation. Nathan stared at the name, the same handwriting, the same pattern, the same person connected to the altered records. Clara looked at the document. Can this prove it? William nodded. Not everything. He looked toward the burned remains of the barn. But it's enough to show someone has been trying to force you off this land. Nathan folded the paper. Then he looked at Clara. The woman who had arrived with nothing, the woman everyone dismissed, the woman who now stood beside him when everything was falling apart. And for the first time he understood something clearly. He had spent his whole life protecting this ranch, but Clara was the one teaching him how to fight for it. The truth was getting closer, but so was the person who wanted it buried. For the first time in months, Nathan Hayes felt like the pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. But answers did not bring peace, not yet, because every answer pointed towards someone he had known for years, Someone who had shared meals at the same tables, someone who had smiled while shaking his hand, someone who believed money could control every outcome. Evelyn Whitmore. The morning after William Foster brought the documents, Broken Pine Ranch felt different, not safer, but stronger. The men no longer moved around wondering what was happening. They had a direction. They had proof that someone was working against them. Nathan spent the morning in the office with William, going through every paper again, every order, every signature, every payment. Clara sat nearby with her notebook open. She did not speak unless she had something useful to add. Nathan noticed that. He noticed everything about her now, the way she tapped the end of her pencil when she was thinking, the way she carefully folded documents before putting them away, the way she never interrupted someone, even when she already knew the answer. "She's good at this," William said quietly. Nathan looked up. "At what?" "Seeing things." Nathan glanced toward Clara. William smiled faintly. "You sound surprised." Nathan leaned back in his chair. "I spent a long time thinking strength looked different." William looked amused. "And now?" Nathan watched Clara studying another receipt. "Now I know better." The final piece came from an unexpected place, a burned section of the old barn. For days, everyone believed there was nothing left there except damaged wood and ashes. But Clara remembered something. The night before the fire, Nathan had moved some older ranch records into a locked chest near the barn office, not because he expected trouble, because he had always kept important documents close. The fire destroyed most of the building, but not everything. That afternoon, Clara walked carefully through the remains with Nathan and William. The snow had melted slightly, leaving the ground wet and dark. Broken boards lay scattered across the earth. The smell of smoke still lingered. Nathan stopped near the old office corner. There, a small iron chest sat beneath fallen beams, damaged, covered in soot, but still closed. Sam helped move the heavy pieces of wood. After several minutes, the chest was free. Nathan opened it slowly. Inside were old ranch papers, land records, tax receipts, delivery notes, and beneath them, a stack of payment records. William took the papers carefully. His expression changed. "What?" Nathan asked. William looked through the pages. "These are payments." "To who?" William turned the paper around. Name was written clearly, a man who had worked as a temporary supplier for the Whitmore operation. Clara stepped closer. "And these dates?" William looked again. They matched the missing shipments. Nobody spoke. The wind moved through the broken barn, the same wind that had carried smoke away weeks earlier. Now it carried the truth back. By sunset, they had everything they needed. Not rumors, not guesses. Proof. William rode into Pine Hollow with Nathan and Clara. The town hall was nearly empty when they arrived, but word traveled fast. By the time Evelyn Whitmore entered the building, nearly the entire town had gathered. She walked in wearing a dark coat and a calm expression, until she saw the papers in Nathan's hand. Then, for the first time, her confidence changed. "Nathan," her voice was careful. "What is this?" Nathan stepped forward. "The truth." The room became silent. William placed the documents on the table. These records show someone connected to the Whitmore operation paid for altered deliveries and false accounts connected to Broken Pine Ranch. Evelyn looked at William. "Connected to my family does not mean I ordered anything." "That's true," William replied. A pause. "But we have more." He placed another paper down. A payment record, a signature. The room shifted. People leaned closer. Evelyn looked at the page, then quickly looked away. "That proves nothing." Clara watched her. Months earlier, Clara might have looked away. Not now. She stepped forward. "No." The room quieted. "It proves something." Evelyn turned toward her. Clara held herself steady. It proves you believed nobody would look closely. A few people in the crowd lowered their eyes because they remembered. They remembered laughing when Clara first arrived. They remembered assuming she had nothing to offer. They remembered deciding her worth before knowing her. Clara continued. You thought I was only the woman who cooked meals. Her voice remained calm, but while I was in that kitchen, I was watching. She held up the receipt book. I noticed missing supplies, different handwriting, changed numbers. She looked at Evelyn. You forgot that people who work with their hands learn to pay attention. Evelyn's face hardened. You think this makes you important? The words came sharper now. You were a cook. Clara looked at her. Yes. She nodded. I was. The answer surprised everyone, because Clara did not deny it. She did not try to become something else. I cooked for people who worked until their hands hurt. She glanced toward Nathan. I helped build a place where people wanted to come home. Then she looked back at Evelyn. There is nothing small about that. The room was silent. Even those who once mocked her had nothing to say. Nathan stepped forward. His voice carried across the room. When Clara arrived, this ranch was already struggling. He looked around. I was losing money, losing workers, losing hope. His eyes moved toward Clara. She didn't save this ranch because she had money. A pause. She saved it because she cared. Clara looked down. Nathan continued. And she did it long before anyone in this town knew her name. The words settled over the room, not as a speech, as a fact. Evelyn left Pine Hollow before sunset. No dramatic scene. No final argument. Just a woman walking away from a town that no longer believed her version of the story. The following weeks were quiet. Not easy, but quiet. The evidence was enough. The men responsible for helping sabotage Broken Pine Ranch were brought before the proper authorities. The missing records were recovered. The truth was no longer hidden. And slowly, Pine Hollow began to change. People who once avoided Clara stopped her on the street. They asked about her recipes. They asked about the ranch. Some apologized. Some did not know how. Clara never demanded it. She had learned something important. A person's worth was not created by someone else finally recognizing it. One evening, Nathan and Clara stood outside the rebuilt barn. The first section had been completed. Fresh wood replaced the burned beams. A new lantern hung above the entrance. Nathan looked across the ranch. We lost a lot, Clara nodded. Yes, but we found something too. She looked at him. What? Nathan smiled slightly. A reason to stay. The mountains stood quietly behind them. The same mountains that had watched her arrive with nothing. The same mountains that had watched her almost leave. Now they watched her stand beside the man who had chosen her. Not because he needed saving. Not because she needed rescuing. Because somewhere between a ranch kitchen and a winter storm, two people had built something stronger than either of them expected. A home. And for Clara Whitaker, that word still felt strange sometimes. Home. Not a room she rented until someone decided she was no longer needed. Not a kitchen where she worked quietly in the background while others took the credit. Not a place she had to earn every morning by proving she belonged. A real home. She stood outside the rebuilt farmhouse of Broken Pine Ranch on a warm summer evening, watching the last light settle over the Colorado foothills. The mountains behind the ranch carried the same blue shadows they always had. The pine trees still moved with the same quiet sound. The cattle still wandered across the open fields beneath the wide western sky. But everything else had changed. The old broken fences were gone. The empty storage sheds had been repaired. The barn that once stood as a reminder of loss now stood stronger than before, its fresh wooden beams glowing gold beneath the evening sun. And near the kitchen window, a small garden Clara had planted in the spring was beginning to bloom. Nathan walked up behind her carrying 2 tin cups of coffee. He handed one to her without saying a word. She smiled. Years ago, she would have thanked him quickly and stepped aside. Now she simply accepted it and stood beside him. The silence between them no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt like belonging. "You still thinking about leaving?" Nathan asked. Clara looked at him. A small smile touched her face. "Not for a long time." Nathan looked back toward the ranch. "Good." That was all he said, but Clara knew him well enough now to hear everything behind that one word. The months after Evelyn Whitmore's downfall were not filled with grand celebrations. Life in the West rarely worked that way. There were still broken wagon wheels, still early mornings, still cattle that wandered too far and needed bringing back, still storms that arrived without warning. But there was something different at Broken Pine Ranch. People stayed. The ranch hands who once talked about leaving now arrived before sunrise. Laughing near the barn while preparing their tools, Samuel Carter had repaired the old fence line on the northern pasture and claimed it was only because a crooked fence bothered him. Nobody believed him. Turner started helping Clara keep the kitchen garden. Benjamin Cole became the first person to volunteer whenever Clara tested a new recipe. "Someone has to make sure the ranch survives your experiments," he would joke. But he always returned for another serving. The ranch had become a place where people did more than work. They gathered, they talked. They remembered that life was meant to be shared. Clara's cooking eventually became known beyond Pine Hollow. It started small. A traveler stopped at the ranch after hearing about her apple preserves. Then a merchant from a nearby settlement asked if she would sell him jars for his store. Then a family from another valley came asking if Clara would teach their daughters some of the recipes she had learned from her grandmother. Clara almost refused the first time. Not because she did not want to help, because she could hardly believe anyone would travel that far for something she had made. Nathan found her sitting at the kitchen table that night, looking through her grandmother's old recipe book. The leather cover was worn. The pages had softened from years of use. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Clara ran her fingers along the edge of the book. "My grandmother always said food was never just food." Nathan leaned against the doorway. What did she mean? Clara looked up. She said a meal could tell someone, "You matter." Someone thought about you. Nathan smiled. She was right. Clara closed the book. "You think she would have liked this place?" Nathan looked around the kitchen, at the wooden shelves she had repaired, at the table where ranch hands now gathered every evening, at the woman who had turned a forgotten corner of the ranch into the heart of it. "I think she would have known exactly what you were building." By autumn, there was another change coming to Broken Pine Ranch, one that everyone in Pine Hollow had been quietly expecting. Nathan had never been a man who cared about appearances. He did not care about fancy clothes. He did not care about impressing wealthy families. But when he walked into town one Saturday morning, wearing his cleanest shirt and carrying a small velvet box in his coat pocket, even old friends noticed. William Foster saw him outside the general store. The deputy leaned against the wooden railing. "You look nervous." Nathan frowned. "I'm not nervous." William raised an eyebrow. Nathan looked away. After a moment, he admitted, "Maybe a little." William laughed. "Never thought I'd see the day." Nathan shook his head. "You and everyone else." That afternoon, Nathan rode Clara out beyond the eastern pasture. The place had become their favorite spot, a small hill overlooking the ranch. The wind moved gently through the grass. The mountains stretched across the horizon. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Nathan reached into his coat. Clara noticed. Her breath caught slightly. Nathan looked down at the ring in his hand. "I used to think I had everything figured out." Clara watched him. "I thought a man's job was to hold on to what he had. Protect the land, protect the money, protect the name." He paused, but I was wrong. The wind moved between them. "I spent years trying to build something nobody could take from me." Nathan looked at her. And then you came here with one suitcase and a recipe book. Clara smiled softly. I remember you telling me the ranch wasn't a place for comfort. It wasn't. A small smile appeared on his face, but it became a place where I found everything that mattered. He took her hand. Clara Whitaker, will you stay with me? Not because this ranch needs you, his voice lowered, but because I do. For a moment, Clara said nothing. The woman who had once stood in the middle of Pine Hollow, hearing strangers decide her worth, had no words. Then she nodded. Yes, and Nathan, the man who had once believed he needed no one, finally allowed himself to hold on to something he could never replace. Their wedding was simple, just family, friends, neighbors. A few ranch hands who insisted they were only there because they wanted free food afterward. The ceremony took place near the ranch beneath the open Colorado sky. Clara wore a dress she had sewn herself. Nathan wore a dark jacket that Sam claimed made him look almost respectable. The whole town came, even some of the people who once whispered when Clara first arrived. They stood quietly as she walked forward, not because she was the woman who had won a cowboy's heart, but because she was the woman who had changed their understanding of strength. Years later, Clara returned to Pine Hollow with her family. The streets looked smaller than she remembered. The same wooden buildings stood along the road. The same mountains watched from a distance. But the whispers were gone. Children ran past her laughing. Shop owners greeted her by name. Women from nearby towns still came to learn her recipes and share their own stories. Clara stood outside the old boarding house where she had once worked, the same place where she had packed her suitcase after losing her position, the same place where she had wondered if anyone would ever give her a chance. Nathan stood beside her. You all right? She looked at the building, then at the town, then at him. Yes, a quiet smile crossed her face. I was just remembering the woman who walked down this street years ago. Nathan held her hand. What would you tell her? Clara looked toward the mountains. I would tell her to stop waiting for someone else to decide if she belongs. The wind moved through Pine Hollow, soft, steady, like a reminder of all the miles behind them. Clara Whitaker did not become valuable because a cowboy chose her. Nathan Hayes chose her because she had already shown the world what she was worth. And in the end, the woman everyone once ignored became the person nobody could forget. Not because she demanded to be seen, but because she never stopped standing tall when the world looked away. And maybe somewhere in your own life, you have known what it feels like to walk into a room and wonder if anyone would ever notice the heart you carried inside. Imagine standing where Clara stood, with nothing but a worn suitcase, an old recipe book, and the courage to begin again when the world had already decided who you were. Her story was never only about a ranch or a cowboy who fell in love. It was about finding the place where you no longer have to apologize for being yourself. It was about how one person's kindness, patience, and belief can remind another person that they were never truly forgotten. Nathan did not save Clara by choosing her. He simply saw what had always been there, and Clara did not save the ranch with her cooking alone. She saved it with loyalty, warmth, and the quiet strength she carried every day, because sometimes the greatest love stories are not built by perfect people. They are built by two people who have been hurt, who choose to trust again, and who find healing in each other. If Clara's journey touched your heart, tell us in the comments what moment in her story stayed with you the most. And if you enjoy stories of love, courage, mystery, and second chances, we invite you to subscribe. Many more unforgettable journeys are waiting for you in the stories still to come.